They drove across the country twice.
And you made it back both times.
Barely.
Without filling up on gas.
Really, we wanted to be early adopters of the e-car movement.
But driving across Wisconsin left a Franklin couple with range anxiety.
Because there's a lack of places to get a fast charge.
This week on Open Record, the $78 million plan to build high-voltage EV chargers.
People want to build charging stations.
And an old state law.
We're one of only 2 states that has not solved this problem yet.
That's putting up resistance. From the FOX6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm your host, Bryan Polcyn, and I'm joined by Open Record's executive producer, Sarah Smith. Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
And we are joined by FOX6 main anchor, reporter extraordinaire, and super fan of Quinnipiac University's Bobcats, the national champions in hockey, reigning Ben Handelman. Hey, Ben.
You nailed it. Nailed the pronunciation on that. Long-time listener, first-time caller. So thanks for having me.
I have messed up the name of your university so many times, and we finally figured out it's like Economowalk, Quinnipiac.
Yeah,
and now
that's
I know
it.
Yeah. The Quinnipiac Bobcats.
Yep. We beat Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio State last year in ice hockey, and that's what it takes for you guys to learn how to say my university name. Then
and you were there. That's a real fan.
It was a real tough decision to fly to Tampa, Florida, in the middle of winter to watch, my ice hockey team win the national championship.
Because we think about hockey, we think about Florida. Anyway, we are recording this episode on Wednesday, December 20th for release on Thursday, December 21st. Now, some of you listening to the podcast may very well be doing so in your car, on the way to see loved ones for the holidays. And if seeing family isn't cause enough for a little extra anxiety, driving there in an electric vehicle could possibly fry your nerves, especially if you're pushing the limits of your EV's battery storage. Ben, this is a phrase that you talked about in your story known as range anxiety, and you found it's a real problem, especially right here in the Badger State. What's going on with that?
It's a problem all across the country. I mean, if you own an EV car, and I talked about this in the story, the infrastructure is still in its infancy. We went from having very few electric cars to suddenly the auto manufacturers are like, you know what? We're going to make every model an electric car. But what I found in my story, Wisconsin's especially bad at having range anxiety. We have lots of range anxiety here in the state.
Well, and you started this story as one thing, right? And it kind of went into like, oh, these are all these things I found out. So when you went into this story, what was your original story idea? Which I went on a long
journey with this story, which was, I started the story with
Did you run out of battery along the way? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Twice.
How many? Yeah. I'm looking to see if Brian has notes for how many puns he's going to make here. Yeah. I started the story with a simple question. Why don't we see electric chargers at every gas station across the state? You know, it seems like a simple thing that would be there.
We've got E85. Why not have an electric charger?
The gas stations already exist, right? The property's there for cars. All they need is to pop in these chargers. Why don't they exist? And the journey it took me on, I was not expecting to find out the things that I found out. So it started with a simple question, and the story got into electric charging and why they don't exist here in Wisconsin. And it's fascinating. It's a fascinating story about why they don't exist.
Well, I feel like this is one of those things. If you're already in the EV world, if you have an electric vehicle, you have been forced to encounter this, especially if you go on any kind of longer trips. But if, like the rest of us who are still driving old gas guzzlers, if you've never had to experience it, I've kind of had the same question. When is the infrastructure going to be there? And I think for those who are considering whether to buy an electric vehicle, a big part of the question is, where am I going to charge and what's it going to cost? And I'm kind of waiting for that to play out. But I didn't know any of this.
Right.
And so I watched your story just with fascination about the things you found out.
Can we start this conversation too with some of the terminology that I learned through this process?
Please.
Yeah.
Because I don't think a lot of people who drive gas cars really know how EVs work.
No, that was one of my questions when I remember we looked at the script and I realized, do you just drive up and plug it in and what do you do?
Right.
Do you wait? Is it as fast as a gas?
And this isn't like the AC plug on your vacuum cleaner, right? This is
that's the thing. That's what's interesting about this. So, okay, if you have an electric car, obviously you need to plug it in somewhere, right? And the big question is, do I need special equipment for that? Where do I do it? You can plug your car into just a normal outlet. That is called a level 1 charger. Okay.
Level 1.
There are 3 levels we're going to talk about here. Level 1, level 2, level 3. So level 1 would be, I mean, literally, you just need an outlet to plug your car
A
in.
regular old
wild.
110 outlet, you plug it in.
What is the problem with that kind of a level 1 charger? It will take days
Forever.
to plug your car and
So
charge
like
it.
overnight's not enough?
No, I mean, not
Really?
not on a level 1. Not if you're just plugging it into a normal outlet.
your
Okay.
outlet in your
Because
car.
there's not enough juice getting into your car. So it's all about how quickly can the juice get into my car.
Well,
For how
I
much
thought that
I'll
was
do.
the whole point is you go home, you plug it in, and overnight, then you're ready to go the
That
next
is the point, Brian, but that would be called a level 2 charger.
Aha, we are learning. Okay.
That is what most people have. And if you're buying an electric car right now, you do need to pay. It just can be a few extra $1,000, but it's part of the infrastructure of your home now, like a water heater. Or, it's a kind of a
Yeah.
one-time payment. And now you're good for electric cars foreseeable future until the thing breaks
So
down.
this is something an electrician then comes in and specially
Right.
installs? Okay. So now this is a feature of a home, too. If you're selling a home, hey, we have an electric charger.
And it's similar to like, when you have, if you go to your house and look at how your dryer's plugged in, that's not the same kind of electricity because it takes more juice, right? So it puts more juice in your car. Yes, an electrician comes in and that will charge your car quicker. That can be done overnight. So it'll take a few hours, maybe up to 8 hours to get you to 85%. Most people, you don't want to fill, I've learned this, your electric battery up to 100% because then the battery will start to lose its life quicker. So most people, day to day, fill it up to 85% and drive around.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the day when we can drive onto a pad, like your phone can lay on the
Yeah,
you drive onto a
right?
pad,
And
it
just-
charges automatically,
yeah.
and then it knows when to sort of cut off the charge because it doesn't want to do exactly what you're talking
Right.
about.
And when we're thinking about electric cars, it is different mentality than filling up your gas guzzler because with an electric car, you're eliminating the gas station. You don't need to go to it, right? Why? Because you're filling your car up at home most of the time with that
Right.
level 2 charger that you've installed in your garage, or maybe your apartment complex has a level 2 charger. So you're going home every night, or some people just do it like every once a week or twice a week because
Depending
drive
on
that
how
much,
much
right?
you drive. Yeah.
Okay.
and boom, you plug it in. You don't have to go to the gas station anymore. So that's great. If I was just going to and from work, or how many times, the range of an electric car, obviously it varies depending on the model, but let's say it's on average like 200 miles. Okay. How often are we
Truly.
going more than 200 miles
Right.
round trip?
Yeah.
The problem is sometimes we do.
Yeah.
Sometimes we
Well,
want to go to
The
Lambeau
people
Field.
in your story
Yeah.
too. Like,
Right.
they are travelers. They're not just, dink dink around their house.
And here comes the level 3 charger. This is the charger that everyone in the industry does not think that EVs will take off until this infrastructure is built. And what I found out is the infrastructure is almost non-existent here in Wisconsin. The level 3 charger is much like a gas station, very high-speed chargers. You pull up to an electric public station, like a gas station, plug your car in, 20 to 40 minutes, you're back up to the 85%.
And you pay, right?
And you pay
Okay.
like a gas station.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that issue
I
because
learned so much
I'm
after
telling
your
you,
story. I'm
so
telling you.
did I.
Yes.
Yeah,
We
I
will
agree.
talk about that. And I know we've only got so much time with you, so I want to get to this because I think this is the fascinating piece. One of the things that's held me back from considering one is I do take longer trips to St. Louis to see family. And that's going to be out of the range of any electric car that I could afford. I don't know if there's any that can go 400 plus miles.
right.
Because of that, it's not even a question. I can't do it. But there are these level 3 chargers you're talking about. How many of them are there? How long does it take? How much does it cost? Those are all questions we're trying to figure out. What did you find out about that? And how many of these are out there?
So there are hundreds of electric chargers in Wisconsin. The problem is almost all of them are level 2 chargers, the kind that takes up to 8 hours. That's not going to work on your road trip to go to St. Louis, Brian.
Not unless you're planning it overnight, right?
Yeah. And a
halfway
lot of
across
hotels now
Wisconsin.
have those level 2 chargers. So that's great. You go to the hotel, boom, plug them in. But that's not going to work if you're just trying to drive to St. Louis.
Yeah.
So how many level 3 chargers are in the state? That number drops for chargers that can take any model EV. You go from hundreds of available chargers down to just 4.
Yeah.
There are only 4
In the state.
high-speed level chargers that can take any model car. Now, there are people who will be listening to this or watching this, and they have a Tesla, and they're like, what are you talking about? Tesla has its own, they're way ahead of the game. So they built their own network of charging stations. So this conversation doesn't really apply to the Tesla people because they do have a lot of chargers out there. The problem is all the other models, they don't have that. All they have are these 4 chargers. So if you have a Ford or a Nissan or
I don't know, maybe I don't know much about this, but couldn't Tesla make a lot more money by making these things compatible with other vehicles?
Funny you ask, because just announced Tesla has reached a deal with the government to start allowing other models into their station.
This is it feels like it's part of the whole infrastructure's figuring itself out.
Right.
And a lot of this comes down to who's going to make the money and how, right?
Well, so here's what happened. So the government wants to avoid all these different companies making their own networks. They don't want a Ford network and a Tesla network and, whatever, a Honda network. Tesla's been so far ahead of the game that everyone's kind of conforming to Tesla. Okay, so they're out using kind of the same equipment they are to try and make one standardized program. So, as part of the bipartisan national infrastructure bill, the government, they're dishing out hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars to build charging stations all across the country.
Level 3 charging stations.
Level 3 charging stations that will get rid of the range anxiety. These things will start popping up everywhere is the hope, right? So Wisconsin applied for some of that money, and they were awarded more than $76 million to build charging stations that the state says, with that $76 million, we can't get rid of range anxiety. We will pop a charger. They have a plan. I've got it right here. The Wisconsin Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan. They want to put 64 charging stations throughout the state. They think that will eliminate range anxiety. You can go anywhere in the state, and there will be another charger within 50 miles, less than a mile off the interstate. But there's a big problem here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, okay. Because you think, we've got the money.
That's great. Yeah, we're going to put these up.
It's illegal in Wisconsin with the current law to put in these kinds of chargers. Fascinating to me. I had no idea this problem existed, but literally the federal government wants to bring in truckloads of money, and it can't come to Wisconsin because of the current laws on the books.
And I'm trying to figure out, explain this to me. How can there be a law that would have even predicted something like this that could prohibit the installation of electric chargers?
And I don't think the law that's on the books thought of electric vehicles, but here's the law that is making it so difficult for the money to come here. Currently in Wisconsin, if you sell electricity by the kilowatt hour, you have to be a public utility. You have to be We Energies. You have to be a power company. They don't want just like Bryan Polcyn doing something in his basement, creating electricity and starting
my own power grid. Right.
And private companies, they say you can do that, but you have to be a public utility. Quick Trip does not want to be a public utility because once you're public, you have to open up your books.
Yeah.
You're part of that scrutiny. So it is currently illegal in Wisconsin to sell electricity by the kilowatt hour.
And it has to be sold that way, if I understand, because that's the only way to really reliably measure how much electricity is being delivered to these vehicles and how much to charge for it, right? Because right now there are some of these stations, if I understand, they charge by time. But depending
in
on
Wisconsin. To get around this law, we talked about this. There's 4 chargers. Tesla has these supercharging stations. Well, how are they allowed to sell electricity? They kind of skirt the law by selling electricity by time. Now, think about this. It'd be like going to a gas station, putting in the pump, and then charging you for the 15 minutes you were there. Mm-hmm. Well, how much gas got in my car? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, you have a really small hose or a really small gas tank.
Right. And we think we know how much gas comes out of that pump during that time. But it's not an exact measurement. It's a terrible way to measure how much, in this case, electricity, or in the gas case, gas is getting into your car. And the federal government has said, we don't want that. We're not going to give any states money until they conform and sell electricity by the kilowatt hour, where you can actually measure how much juice is going into your car.
And clearly other states have figured this out and taken care of it.
48 other states have figured
It's
this
us in
out.
Nebraska, right?
Yeah.
Us in Nebraska have not figured this out. And here's the risk. I talked to Craig Thompson from the DOT, who's the secretary. All these other states, we're all building these infrastructure programs at the exact same time. All this money is being dumped into states at the exact same time. If you're one of 2 states who doesn't have everything lined up, all the other states are going to be building fast charging stations and suddenly you could be left out of, there may not be the material when you finally get around to building your charging stations. Well, think of what the demand's about to be for these kinds of things. And let's say I'm Phil from Tennessee, and I've always wanted to see the Packers, but I've got a electric car, and I find out going to Wisconsin might be tough to get around. I'm going to change my vacation. I'm going to go to Memphis. That's a real possibility of people choosing in the future where they go based off of if they can get there.
So as I always do, I start researching topics before we come on the podcast. And lo and behold, I find out that yesterday, literally the day before we record this, there's a public hearing on 2 pieces of legislation that would solve this problem in Wisconsin. You've got a press release right there in front of you. Tell me all about it, Ben.
So these are coming from 2 Republicans. They've tried to solve this before, where they want to change the rules to allow private companies to sell electricity by the kilowatt hour, and it would be legal. Seems like an easy solution, right? Like the other states have figured this out, no problem. Here in Wisconsin, it's not been so easy. These bills have failed in the past. And the reason is, I'm going to guess lobbying is taking place here, because the charging stations are coming and people are trying to figure out who is allowed to own these, who's going to make the money off these, and go figure in Wisconsin, it's been a messy process so far.
And as I listened to the testimony, what was really striking to me is if this goes the way the bill's sponsors want it to go, instead of having just gas stations that you go to for your fill up, there will just be electric charging stations. Instead, it is going to be Quick Trip. It's going to be grocery stores. It's going to be restaurants. It's going to be places that want to capture you for that little bit of time that you've got to sit 20 or 30 minutes at the charging station. Yeah. They want you to come in and shop. They want you to come in and spend money. And it's a way to attract business. So we may see these chargers show up in all kinds of places if this legislation finally passes. If it doesn't, what happens? I mean, like you said, are we that far behind everybody else?
Now, there are some issues that people have with the bill, and it's who's being left out. There are some companies out there that are renewable energy companies. Let's say they have a bunch of solar panels that creates electricity, and then they put it in the batteries and sell it to EVs. Under this bill, that would not be allowed. All the electricity under this Republican bill has to come from the current electric companies. Now, talking to the DOT, why is that? Why not just let everybody in on this? Wouldn't that solve the issue? Well, they don't think that those companies make enough electricity to really provide, and that's probably true right now.
Well, how have they resolved this though in Iowa and Minnesota and Illinois and other places? Because presumably they have the same kinds of potential conflicts.
Yeah, well, and you have to look at the makeup of the legislature. We tend to be,
everything is, we have a Democrat governor, a Republican legislature.
Right, so things get through a lot easier in states where all Republicans are in control or all Democrats are in control and things fly through. But there's something interesting in here. They're going to charge the same as there's a tax on the kilowatt hour at the public stations. Now, most people, when they fill up, they still will be filling up mostly at home. You don't pay a gas tax for that. And there's an issue in this state with, well, wait, how do we pay for our roads? We pay for our roads with a gas tax. So if everyone's driving an EV, that could be an issue. But how did they solve, or how have they thought about that here in Wisconsin? They charge EV drivers much more to register their car. It's $175, I believe, in the state compared to the $85 that taxpayers with gas cars have.
Yeah, no, I don't know what it is because I don't have an EV. But I did see in this, they're talking about this legislation adding a tax of 3 cents per kilowatt hour at these public charging stations.
Now, if I'm an electric car driver, I would maybe be saying, wait a second, I already pay way more on my car registration fee, and now you're going to double tax me? You're going to tax me like a gas guzzler? Why don't you drop my car registration fee back down, and then I'll pay the 3 cents. But it doesn't really work out that way, too, because, like we said, you're charging most of the time at home. You're really only using these level 3 chargers when you're going on road trips or
if you've not done a good job of charging at home. You forgot to put your phone on the charger last night. The car's not charged.
And they probably feel too that I'm driving an electric vehicle. I'm helping the environment. So why are you taxing me here, taxing me there? Right. Kind of getting me coming and going. So, because people are buying these electric vehicles because of that reason.
I talked to two people, Bob and Deanna Alba. Great couple. Bob's a retired train engineer. Deanna works at UWM. They recently bought an electric car, and they, for fun, wanted to take it across the country just to see if they could. And what they found was a fascinating look at America's EV infrastructure, which is terrible. I mean, they would show up to states that wouldn't have them. There'd be like one charger the next 150 miles. And when they showed up at the location, it was broken. But what I thought was fascinating talking to them, and they went to Tucson and back, Florida and back. They made it both times. When they wanted to drive around Wisconsin in their EV, they couldn't even do it.
Yeah.
Because Bob wanted to go out and visit friends in Adams County. I think it was a bunch of train engineers who were getting together. He wanted to go there and back. Couldn't take the EV car because there is literally nowhere to fill up your EV fast right now in Wisconsin. So it's fascinating that, it's harder to drive around Wisconsin than it is to make it to Phoenix. And not saying driving to Phoenix in an EV is easy, but...
Now, you have that infrastructure plan, the electric vehicle infrastructure plan, and I had actually looked at that full report yesterday. Page 66 had a map, and that map shows essentially what the state wants to put in is these level 3 chargers all along the interstate corridors,
right,
and the major roads. Those would be sort of the public ones that the state DOT is designing. But if I'm hearing this right, if this legislation were to pass, you would have all sorts of additional chargers, fast chargers at these private businesses. So you could have a lot more than that.
And here's how the program works. The state is actually not putting in the chargers. How this program works is they have identified places that they think they could work. And what they're creating is an incentive program for the
So it
gas
will be
station.
the private businesses putting them in. The state's just helping facilitate and design.
Exactly. It'd be 80-20. The state will pay 80% of the costs and the private business is 20. And that's what the money will be used for. Because the state does not want to get into the business of owning EV charging stations. They want the private businesses to do it, to, the upkeep, the run, and eventually they'd make the money. And if you're a private business, and going back to my original question, why don't these exist at every gas station? Well, one, it's kind of illegal right now, but even if it was legal, I think the private companies are waiting for there to be this money to pay for it. Why am I going to put something in at full cost when I know the government's got this program that's going to pay for 80% of it if they can just figure out how to pass it?
It's always about following the money. And eventually, when the economics make enough sense, the infrastructure grows to the point that I can make the decision that buying an EV car makes sense, then suddenly more people are going to be doing this. But we're not there yet. Clearly, Wisconsin sounds like it's maybe a little bit behind the game.
We're behind the game. I do think, and I talked to a UWM professor about this, they're coming. The world will figure out if people buy EV cars, there is money to be made in EV charging. If there is money to be made, eventually we will figure it out. Right now, the state of Wisconsin is just trying to figure out who's going to control all the chips, who's going to control the marbles. And we've been slower at figuring that out than other states. And because of that, this is the issue that we've put ourselves in.
Well, that's a good time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question for which we have not prepared. And the person who brings us that question, as always, is executive producer Sarah Smith. Okay.
It's me. Ben, if you have listened or seen the podcast, I love to ask about food. Food is a very polarizing thing. So today's question is more of just kind of like a statement, or maybe it is a question. I'm talking about the best and the worst foods to reheat. And how if it's a best way.
Did you do this on purpose?
You know what? As soon as I wrote
Because
down
you
the
know what
question,
I'm
I was
gonna
like,
do.
he's going to say the air fryer and he's going to say chicken.
Yes.
So
No, not chicken.
Oh.
But air
But
fryers have made this
Yes.
question an entirely different question.
that's fine. So let's say like worst foods. Okay, let's take maybe the air fryer out of the
Okay,
equation.
air fryer doesn't exist.
Yeah.
French fries. Could
Yeah.
never reheat French fries. They're terrible. They're awful.
Yeah.
I just got an air fryer. I know this already for Christmas. My mom got me an air fryer. I had to open it up because I don't want to. I'm traveling for Christmas. I'm like, that box is too big. I already know what's inside it. I
Yeah.
know it's an air fryer. So I opened it up. But so I'm about to enter the air fryer world.
Welcome.
So I should
Suddenly-
not be cooking chicken in there. Isn't that
No,
the
no,
whole
no,
point
no,
of
no,
it?
no, no. Long, so we'll explain later. We'll go back and
We'll
watch
go
an
back
old
to the
episode
Chicken
of
Cube
Off the
episode.
Record. Yeah.
I will answer on what my nose has picked up here in the FOX6 studios. The person who keeps cooking fish in
yeah.
the microwave.
Is that about just the smell of a food, or is that about what's the worst reheated food, though? Is that reheated fish?
Just because it's so
Well, reheated
yeah,
fish is
fragrant.
terrible
Yeah,
too.
no, that's true.
Right?
Are you
It
talking
dries it
about
out.
smell, like worse for others
no,
around
I'm
you,
just
or
saying
worse taste?
Like, well, I think maybe both. I mean,
I like
Okay.
this. This is a thinker.
yeah,
It could go
well,
different ways.
I also
Because-
think okay, air fryer again, but pizza, leftover pizza, it would never get. I've tried the pizza stone.
Why do you
to get it
reheat
crisp.
leftover pizza? You eat it cold. That's
Exactly.
what
I don't
leftover
know.
pizza's supposed to be.
Sociopath. Like, but the other thing, but hot tip is, if you don't have an air fryer for reheating your pizza, put it in a skillet. Just set it in a skillet.
Yeah.
It gets the bottom all crispy again.
Sure.
You got to do it kind of slow though, so that the top, the cheesy gets a little more melty.
Do you put a little olive oil in there? to get
No,
it?
nothing. Just straight.
Oh, now I'm going to tell you, before the air fryer came along, again, fries, you can't reheat them, but truffle oil, a little bit of truffle oil in
fancy.
a pan, and then you cook the fries. They crisp up, and they've got that little extra bit of flavor. Outstanding. But then the air fryer came along. You can reheat
Ben.
most things.
Is this podcast sponsored yet?
Yes, it's
Because
not, but
by
let-
Johnny Air Fryer.
There's an air fryer company out there.
You
that-
asked the question.
I know, but you're
Okay,
right.
I've
though.
got another one for you. I did smell, but you know when you go out for breakfast and then they're like, "Do you want to take that home?"
Yeah.
And you always take it home, like the eggs.
It's
Yeah, no,
never
you're
the
right. You're right. Eggs don't.
And
Yeah.
usually
First
a
of all, who's
potato-
taking home breakfast? Because if I go out for breakfast, I'm eating that whole thing. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, everything.
Even the bacon gets like.
The- yeah, and the potatoes are never the same
hang on.
either.
Yeah.
If you haven't finished your bacon, then what's wrong?
Yeah, that is the first thing I'm going to finish.
Because bacon is always I'm always hungry for more bacon up to the point where it
Despite-
becomes
yes.
unhealthy. Like
Yeah.
there's never a point at which I'm still hungry for bacon.
Yeah.
And it's or I'm done with bacon and it's not crossed the unhealthy.
No one has said the
Yeah.
worst thing to reheat, and that's mushrooms. Because
Get
they're
rubbery?
soggy.
rubbery,
Yeah.
and then you
Rubbery.
can't chew them. You chew them forever, and shrimp.
Shrimp.
Shrimp
Well,
will be the
okay.
same thing.
But
about that
I will
air
tell
fryer?
you, so we'll get nachos. We'll order it out like at a restaurant, and nachos are usually terrible to reheat because the toppings just don't.
Yeah.
And the chips get soggy.
Oh, they do.
Again, I'm not trying to be the air fryer guy, but that's the first. I reheated nachos in the air fryer and was like, they're crispy again. It's
They
like
are.
magic. So
I
it has
guess we
changed
never
my,
specified how the reheating method.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
that's right.
microwave-
Are we
I
just
said- I
assuming
said and
microwave?
how. No,
microwave
but
is
I
the
think and
worst
how.
reheat.
Okay.
Microwave's the worst reheat method. That's
Agree.
that's why the air
Because
fryer
it's like
is
lava
great
in the
because-
middle and like ice cold on the
Yes,
outside.
It's still quick, but it crisps things up. If you can do it in a skillet, I think you can really reheat some things that are otherwise very poor.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I would have said nachos or French fries before. Now I feel better about that.
Okay. I don't mean to out him on here. I don't even know if he watches or listens. Brian Cramp, I think for a long time, didn't own a microwave. So like he just reheated everything on
In
the
an
stove
oven?
or on the
Is he a
stove top.
caveman?
I don't know. I don't know if it was by choice or
So my
Of
wife,
all the kitchen appliances, that's like one of the cheapest.
I
You
know.
know?
All right, let's hear
And-
from the
and
culinary
most
expert.
used.
my wife will not use the microwave. If she had it her way, she'd rip it off the wall and throw it in the garage.
Wow.
Like, was she even like heat
And
up?
not,
like, if
not
your
just
coffee
because it
gets cold.
doesn't
boiling
heat well,
water?
but I think she just doesn't like the look of it. And she's like, and it's emitting all this radiation, so let's just get rid of it.
Okay.
Well, if
all
that's
right.
what's going to take me out,
Yeah. No, there's other things in my life.
She
that are
died doing what
probably
she loved.
much worse for me.
reheating fish.
So I'm not going to cook any fish around you. You know what though? There's other things that broccoli, cauliflower. Those aren't about
stinky?
reheating. It's just they
It's
stink
the
up the house.
yeah, they're very
I love them
fragrant.
cooked, but then you walk in the
I
house.
mean, they
and it's
stink
like-
up the house when you're cooking them.
Period.
Too,
That's what I
From
mean,
the
right? So
beginning.
it's not just a reheating thing. It's just
so tasty, though.
We could have
Brussels
you could have,
sprouts.
You could have had a whole question about just worst foods in terms of
Stinky.
the odor that they create. And last thing, my daughter is a student at UWM, and I'm telling you, they have fire alarms that go off probably once a week because of popcorn in a microwave and then smoke throughout the whole place. So
Classic college mistake.
that's absolutely
That extra 30 seconds.
Well, Ben, I think we're going to get you out of here in time. I know you've got a place to be. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. And we'd love to have you back anytime.
I hope you learned something from the story.
I learned a
and
lot
the-
from this story.
I did, but can you also come back and tell me how the air fryer is after Christmas?
I will do that.
Tell me all the things that you've air fried.
And maybe in the future we can drive around in our EVs with a better infrastructure if Wisconsin figures this out.
Amen.
That's actually a serious note we'll end it on. But I
Yeah.
just want to say we're going to start calling this off the record segment the air fryer discussion segment. It seems to come up every time.
They're going to cut it real quick.
Yeah, if you have a topic you would like us to discuss on Open Record other than air fryers, or an issue you think we should investigate for Fox 6 News, send us an email to fox6investigators@fox.com. As always, thank you to the people who make this podcast possible. That includes our executive producer, Sarah Smith, our editor, Dave Machuda, and our chief photographer manning the video switcher, Kale Zimney. With that, I'm Bryan Polcyn. We'll be back next week. Or are we? No, wait.
No.
We're not back next
Just
week.
kidding.
We'll be back in 2 weeks. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. See you then.